If you're hearing this, I don't know what day it is for you, what time, whether you're driving to work or lying in bed unable to sleep. For me, it's day 37 since Trans-Pacific Flight 827 went down. 37 days since 237 people fell out of the sky over the South Pacific, and 73 of us somehow didn't die on impact. I'm in an abandoned facility right now, a couple miles inland from our camp, and I've got maybe an hour before I need to make a choice I can't come back from. So I'm going to tell you what happened. All of it. Someone needs to know. My name is Ethan Ward. I'm 34. I make documentaries, or I used to. I was on that flight coming back from Tokyo, heading home to Los Angeles after 3 weeks filming a piece about urban farming projects. Stupid, right? Urban farming. I had my camera gear, my laptop, all my footage carefully backed up on 3 different drives because I'm paranoid about losing work. Turns out that paranoia kept me sane these past 5 weeks. When everything else stopped making sense, I still had the muscle memory of pointing a camera at things, trying to understand them through a lens. The plane went down at 3:47 in the morning. I remember because I'd been awake, couldn't sleep, was watching some mindless action movie on the seatback screen with the timestamp in the corner. We were 7 hours into an 11-hour flight, somewhere over nothing but dark water, when the cabin lights started flickering. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. Then, my screen went black. Then, everyone's screens went black. The woman next to me, Clara, she was a doctor heading to a conference in San Francisco. She looked at me, and I could see she was thinking the same thing I was. This isn't normal turbulence. The pilot came on the intercom, voice calm, said they were experiencing some electrical issues and were going to descend to a lower altitude as a precaution. Standard procedure, he said. Nobody panicked. A few people grumbled about their entertainment systems being out. Some guy 3 rows back made a joke about getting a refund. Then the plane dropped. Not like hitting an air pocket, not that stomach flip feeling. We just fell. The oxygen masks deployed, and people were screaming, and the whole aircraft was shaking like it was tearing itself apart. And maybe it was. I remember grabbing my camera bag, hugging it to my chest like it would protect me, like anything could protect me from what was happening. It lasted forever. It lasted 30 seconds. Both feel true. The last thing I remember before impact was looking out the window and seeing nothing but black, then suddenly trees, so close I could make out individual branches in the emergency lighting from the wing. Then the sound of metal screaming. Then nothing. I woke up dangling upside down, still strapped into my seat, surrounded by jungle. My ears were ringing so loud I couldn't hear anything else at first. Blood was dripping up into my hair, which meant I was inverted, which meant I needed to get out before I passed out. I managed to unbuckle myself, fell about 6 feet onto what used to be the ceiling, landed on something soft that turned out to be a carry-on bag. My camera bag was still somehow strapped across my chest. Dawn was coming. Gray light filtering through the canopy. I could smell aviation fuel and something worse, something I didn't want to identify. I could hear screaming then, distant, coming from multiple directions. The plane had broken apart. I was in the front section, what was left of first class and business, and it had come down in the trees about 20 feet up. Most of us in that section were unconscious or dead. I found the cockpit completely crushed, buried in the branches above. No way anyone up there survived. I stumbled through the jungle toward the loudest screaming and found the beach. That's where the main fuselage section had landed, right on the sand, like someone had tried to belly land the thing. It had carved a trench 100 yards long before coming to rest half in the water. People were everywhere, some wandering in shock, some lying still, some trying to help the injured. Clara was there already, the doctor from my row, and she was barking orders at anyone who could stand. She'd found the first aid kits from the overhead compartments and was doing triage right there on the beach, sorting people by who might live if we helped them and who was already gone. I counted 40 people in that first hour, 40 out of 237. Then someone found the tail section in the shallow water, 200 yards offshore, and we got life rafts and started pulling people out. Another 33, 73 total. That was it. That was everyone we could save. Clara set up a medical area using seat cushions and luggage. She had me and a few others helping her because we could follow instructions without falling apart. There were 12 people who wouldn't make it through the day without surgery, real surgery, and we had nothing but vodka from the drink cart for anesthetic and safety scissors for instruments. She did it anyway. Cut into people right there on the beach, using my camera light because it was the brightest thing we had, trying to stop internal bleeding and set compound fractures and relieve pressure on a collapsed lung. 4 of them died before sunrise. The rest made it. I still don't know how she did it. Day 2 started with Daniel Rourke taking charge. He was this former Marine, late 30s, had that way about him, where when he said something needed to happen, people just did it. He got everyone organized into teams, water team to find fresh water, shelter team to salvage materials from the wreckage, food team to inventory what we had. He was clear about our situation. We had maybe 3 days of food if we rationed hard. We had no idea where we were except somewhere in the South Pacific. We needed to assume rescue would take time. Maya Ibarra, this meteorologist who'd been going to LA for a job interview, she helped narrow down our location based on the flight path and the stars she could see the first night. She figured we were roughly 600 miles from the nearest shipping lanes, on some island that probably wasn't on any tourist maps. That word, probably, that's what got people scared. Not the crash, not the deaths. The idea that we might be somewhere no one would think to look. Nolan Greer, this kid, mid-20s, software engineer, he spent all of day 2 pulling electronics from the wreckage. He got a satellite phone working for maybe 40 seconds before it died completely. Long enough to send coordinates, long enough to say we'd crashed, not long enough to hear if anyone received it. Daniel told everyone that was enough, that help would come, that we just needed to survive until they arrived. I could see in his eyes he didn't believe it, but he needed us to believe it, so we tried. That's when I noticed the injection marks. I was helping Clara check people for injuries, photographing wounds so she could track healing progress, and I saw it on Sophia Hand's arm. This small puncture mark, professional, like from a blood draw, but recent, maybe a week old. I asked her about it, and she had no idea what I was talking about. Then I found another passenger with the same mark, then another. 8 people total, all with identical injection sites on their left arms, none of them remembering getting it. Clara took blood samples using the emergency medical kit, said she'd test it when we got rescued, when we had access to a real lab. She didn't say what she was thinking, but I could guess. Something wasn't right. The third night was when we heard them, sounds in the jungle just beyond the tree line. Heavy movement, deliberate, circling the camp. Daniel said wild boars, said islands like this always had them. But the way he checked the sharpened metal poles we'd set up as a perimeter The way he organized a watch rotation, I knew he wasn't sure. The co-pilot, Jordan Cross, he'd survived with major injuries, but he was conscious by then, and when he heard those sounds, he started laughing. Not funny laughing, broken laughing. He kept saying we weren't supposed to land here. Kept saying the plane tried to go somewhere else, but something made us come here. Clara sedated him, said it was the trauma talking, said he'd make sense once he healed. But I saw her face when she heard those sounds in the dark. She was wondering the same thing I was. What else was on this island with us? That was the first 3 days. That was us thinking we were survivors of a plane crash, waiting for rescue, trying not to die of dehydration or infection. Day 4 was when Alina Torres and Victor Lane didn't come back from the water run. We'd found this freshwater stream about 2 miles inland, cut through dense jungle, rocky terrain, but it was clean and reliable. We'd been sending groups of 4, always 4, with empty bottles and containers salvaged from luggage. Safety in numbers, Daniel said. Alina was a teacher from Portland, early 30s, had been visiting her sister in Tokyo. Victor was an architect, maybe 42, quiet guy who never complained about anything. They went out with Dominic Shaw and Leah Morgan at first light. 2 hours later, Dominic and Leah came back alone, faces white as paper. They'd reached the stream without any problems, filled everything up, started heading back. Alina and Victor were maybe 20 yards behind them, talking about something. Victor was laughing. Dominic heard the laugh cut off mid-sound. He turned around and they were just gone. Not dragged away screaming, not attacked, just absent. Like they'd stepped through a door and closed it behind them. He and Leah searched for 30 minutes, calling their names, following the trail back and forth. They found the water containers sitting on the ground, carefully placed, not dropped. Nothing else. No blood, no signs of struggle, no tracks leading away. Just 2 people erased from existence. Daniel organized a proper search party, took 12 people, including me, back to that spot. We spent 6 hours combing every inch of jungle around that area. There was this ravine about 40 yards from where they disappeared, steep drop into rocks and shallow water below. We climbed down there, searched the bottom. Nothing. No bodies, no belongings, nothing. It was like they decided to vanish. But people don't decide that. People don't just walk away from survival. That night, Marcus Delaney, this investment banker from New York who'd been insisting rescue was days away, he started talking about the plane being cursed. Started saying we needed to move camp, that the wreckage was attracting bad luck. Half the survivors agreed with him. The other half thought he was losing it. Daniel tried to keep everyone calm, but you could see the cracks forming. People were scared, not just of dying out here, but of whatever had taken Alina and Victor. Because something had taken them. We all knew it. Jordan Cross, the co-pilot, he was recovering faster than Clara expected. By day 5, he was sitting up, talking coherently, and Daniel asked him what happened up there. Why did the plane go down? Jordan got this look on his face, like he was deciding whether to tell the truth or make up something easier to swallow. He chose truth. He said they got rerouting orders about 40 minutes before the crash. Not from air traffic control, from somewhere else, some automated system that overrode their navigation. The captain refused to comply, tried to maintain their original heading, but the plane's system started failing. One by one, redundant backups all going offline in sequence. Jordan said he watched their altimeter readings go insane, showing them at 50,000 feet, then sea level, then negative numbers, oscillating so fast it had to be instrument failure. Except he could feel it. Could feel the plane rising and falling in ways that shouldn't be possible. Then he told us about the radar. Said in those final minutes, his screen showed something ahead of them. Not weather, not another aircraft, just this massive return signal, like they were about to fly into a mountain, except they were over open ocean. He said the captain tried everything to avoid it, but the plane wouldn't respond. Then the signal disappeared and they were dropping, systems dead, engines gone, falling blind until they hit the trees. He looked at Daniel when he finished talking and said we weren't supposed to land here. Said whatever that radar signal was, it was keeping people away from this place. Said we got through by accident, and maybe that was worse than dying in the crash. Nobody knew what to do with that information. Some people thought Jordan was still delirious. Others, like Naomi Adler, this anthropologist in her late 40s, she took it seriously. Started asking questions about the island, about what else we'd found. That's when Talia Reese spoke up. Talia was a journalist, 36, had been in Tokyo covering tech startups. She'd been exploring the jungle near camp on day 3 and found something she hadn't mentioned until then. A metal post, rusted almost nothing, sticking up out of the undergrowth. There was writing on it, barely legible. She'd taken a picture on her phone before the battery died. Restricted area, it said. Authorized personnel only. And a date, 1947. 1947. That's 78 years ago. Meaning people had been here. Meaning this island had been used for something. Meaning maybe it was still being used, or watched, or protected. Naomi wanted to investigate immediately. Daniel said no, said we needed to focus on survival and rescue. But Naomi pushed back. She said if people had been here before, maybe they left supplies, maybe they left a way to communicate. Maybe that's our way home. The argument went on for hours. That's when Marcus made his move. He'd been gathering people to his side, folks who thought Daniel was too cautious, who wanted to try everything possible to get rescued. Marcus said we should split into groups. His group would stay at the beach, maintain the signal fires we'd built, wait for rescue. Daniel's group could explore if they wanted. It was a reasonable suggestion, except it meant dividing our resources, our labor, our safety. Daniel tried to explain why that was a bad idea, but Marcus had already made up minds. Day 8 changed everything. We were down to 1 meal a day, strict rationing, and people were getting desperate. Then this cargo container washed up on the beach. Just appeared overnight, like the tide carried it in, except the tide didn't work that way here. The container was military grade, sealed, coated in rust and barnacles like it had been underwater for years. Dominic got it open using a pry bar from the plane's emergency toolkit. Inside we found MREs, meals ready to eat, dozens of them, all dated 1987. Almost 40 years old, but vacuum sealed, still good. There were water purification tablets, medical supplies, blankets. We were celebrating. People were crying with relief, and then Nolan found the cases at the bottom. 12 metal cases, each about the size of a briefcase, each marked with warning labels. Site 7, they said. Biological samples. Handle with extreme caution. The locks had been broken from the inside. Whatever had been in those cases was long gone, but there was residue. Sophia Hahn, our biochemistry grad student, she scraped samples using tools from Clara's medical kit. She said it looked organic, plant-based maybe, preserved in some kind of cryogenic medium. She couldn't be sure without proper equipment, but she was worried. Said if these were biological samples and they got out, we needed to know what we were dealing with. That got Clara thinking about the injection marks again. She pulled Sophia aside, asked her directly if she remembered getting injected with anything in the past few months. Sophia said no, absolutely not. But Clara showed her photos I'd taken, showed her the mark on her own arm. Sophia touched it like she was seeing it for the first time. Then she went pale. She said she'd flown this route before, Tokyo to LA, about 3 months back. Her flight had been delayed by mechanical issues, kept on the tarmac for 6 hours. She remembered feeling drowsy during the delay, remembered waking up with a headache. She'd assumed it was stress. Now she wasn't sure. We checked the others with the marks. All 8 of them had taken this same flight in the past 4 months. All 8 had experienced unusual delays. All 8 had gaps in their memory around those delays. Whatever those injection marks were, someone had deliberately given them to passengers on this route. Someone had been using Trans-Pacific Flight 827 as a delivery system for something. And whatever that something was, maybe it was connected to this island, to those biological samples, to why our plane was forced down here. Day 9, Owen Briggs died. He was a chef from Seattle, 51 years old, big guy with a laugh that carried across the whole camp. He started running a fever on day 8, said he felt fine, just a little warm. By morning he was burning up, sweating through his clothes, shivering like he was freezing. Clara tried everything, antibiotics from the cargo container, fluids, cold compresses. Nothing worked. His temperature hit 107 degrees, and his organs started failing. He was dead by sunset. Clara did an external examination, couldn't find any wounds, any infection sources, any explanation. He just burned out from the inside. 2 more got sick on day 10. Same symptoms, same rapid progression. Clara quarantined them, which meant sticking them in a shelter made from airplane seats and tarp, 20 yards from the main camp. Nobody wanted to say what we were all thinking, that this wasn't a normal disease, that maybe it was connected to those empty cases, to whatever had gotten out. Day 11 was when Nolan finished working on the black box. He'd been pulling electronics from the wreckage since day 2, trying to resurrect anything that might help us. The flight data recorder was damaged, but not destroyed. He managed to extract some of the data, pulled it onto his laptop running on a salvaged battery. What he found didn't make sense. The last 40 seconds before the crash showed altitude readings that were impossible. The plane went from 35,000 feet to 15,000 to 60,000 to 2,000, all in the span of 20 seconds. Vertical speeds that would have torn the aircraft apart, except we survived. The data had to be corrupted. Except Nolan checked it 3 times, ran every diagnostic he knew. The data was intact. The plane had actually done those things. The laws of physics said no, but the black box said yes. Daniel called a meeting that night. Everyone gathered around the fire we kept burning on the beach. He laid out what we knew. 2 people missing, presumed dead. 3 people dead from an unknown fever. A cargo container full of expired military supplies and empty biological cases. A flight data recorder showing impossible events. An island that had been marked as restricted 78 years ago. He said we needed to make a decision. Do we stay here, maintain our beach camp, wait for rescue? Or do we go inland, find out what this island is hiding, maybe find a way to call for help? Marcus stood up, said we were insane to even consider leaving the beach. Said rescue teams would look for us near the wreckage. Said wandering into unknown jungle was suicide. About 30 people agreed with him. The rest stayed quiet. Then Naomi stood up. She said she was going inland, whether anyone came with her or not. Said the answers were out there, and if rescue wasn't coming, we needed those answers to survive. She asked for volunteers. I was the first to raise my hand, not because I was brave, but because staying on that beach waiting to die, waiting for a fever to take me, or for whatever got Alina and Victor to come for me in the night, that felt worse than moving forward. Isaac Moreno volunteered, this park ranger from Colorado, late 30s, knew how to navigate wilderness. Camille Rhodes, a pilot who flew private charters, she came too. And Jonah Price, a geologist who'd been studying volcanic formations in Japan. He said if we were going inland, he could help us understand the terrain. Day 12 we prepared to leave. Gathered supplies, weapons made from sharpened metal, water purification tablets. Daniel agreed to let us go, but said if we weren't back in 4 days, he was coming after us. Marcus said we were fools, said we'd die out there. Maybe he was right. But staying felt like dying slowly. At least this way we'd know what killed us. The last thing I remember before we left was Clara pulling me aside. She said 2 more people had developed fevers during the night. She said whatever was happening, it was accelerating. She needed us to find answers fast. I told her we would. I believed it when I said it. We left at dawn on day 13, headed inland, following Talia's directions to where she'd found that sign. 2 miles through jungle so thick we had to cut our way through. Then 4 more miles following what might have been an old trail, overgrown but still there under the vegetation. And then we found it. The installation. The place this island had kept secret for 60 years. The place that explained everything and nothing at all. "6 miles inland, we found what was left of Operation Deep Winter. That's what the faded signs called it, bolted to concrete walls, half swallowed by jungle growth. The complex spread out over maybe 10 acres, buildings connected by covered walkways that had collapsed under decades of vegetation. Rusted antenna arrays pointed at the sky like skeletal fingers. Bunkers built into the hillside, their blast doors sealed shut or torn completely off their hinges. Everything covered in vines and moss and rot, but underneath you could still see the bones of something massive, something built to last and then abandoned like it never mattered. Jonah was the one who figured out what this place was originally. He found a cornerstone on one of the buildings with a date, 1947, and an insignia he recognized from his graduate work. Cold War-era research facility, he said. The kind of place where governments did things they didn't want anyone knowing about, on islands no one would accidentally find. He'd read about places like this, installations built in the Pacific for weapons testing, biological research, experiments that needed to be far from civilian populations. Most of them had been decommissioned by the 60s, records buried or destroyed. But here we were, standing in one that someone had forgotten to erase. We split up to search the buildings. Naomi and I took the main administrative structure, this long 2-story building with shattered windows and a roof that had caved in on one side. Inside was like stepping into a museum of decay. Filing cabinets overturned, papers scattered and molded together into papier-mâché lumps. Furniture collapsed under its own weight. But in one room, sealed behind a door that had somehow stayed watertight, we found the archive. Metal shelves lined with binders and folders, labels typed on old-fashioned label makers. Project Deep Winter, they said. Climate resilience studies, botanical preservation, adaptive integration. The files told a story I still don't fully understand. It started simple enough. 1949, a team of scientists arrived on this island to study whether plant species from the last ice age could be preserved and potentially revived. The island sits on top of some unique geology, volcanic vents that create these pockets of extreme cold underground, natural freezing that mimics permafrost conditions. They found seeds down there, deep in the cave systems, seeds that had been frozen for 15 to 20,000 years. Pleistocene flora, plants that grew when woolly mammoths walked the earth, and glaciers covered half the continents. The early reports were excited, optimistic. They'd successfully germinated some of the seeds, grown actual living plants from specimens that predated human civilization. The goal was to understand how these species survived extreme climate events, to see if that knowledge could help humanity adapt to whatever came next. Noble enough, right? Scientific research for the good of mankind. Except somewhere around 1956, the mission changed. The files started using different language, adaptive hybridization, cross-species integration, survivability enhancement through biological synthesis. They weren't just studying the plants anymore. They were trying to merge them with other organisms. The idea was that these ancient plants had evolved survival mechanisms we'd lost in modern species, mechanisms that let them endure ice ages and catastrophic climate shifts. If they could transfer those mechanisms to animals, to crops, maybe even to humans, they could create life forms capable of surviving anything. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was exactly the kind of thing that happens when you give scientists unlimited funding and no oversight on an island. No one's watching. We found the lab results in another binder. Early experiments on insects, then rodents, then larger animals. Wild boars were mentioned specifically. Native population on the island used as test subjects. The results were promising at first. Enhanced healing rates, resistance to temperature extremes, decreased need for food and water. Then the side effects started appearing. Behavioral changes, aggression, physical mutations. The plant matter wasn't just enhancing the animals, it was transforming them, integrating into their tissue in ways that shouldn't be possible. The final report we found was dated March 1963. Containment breach in Sector 4, it said. Specimens showing unprecedented adaptation and spread beyond controlled environments. Recommend immediate evacuation and complete site sterilization. No further human contact advised. That was it. No follow-up, no resolution, just a recommendation to burn everything and leave. Except they clearly hadn't burned it. They just left, sealed what they could, and walked away, leaving whatever they'd created to evolve on its own for 60 years. Isaac and Camille found something worse in the containment labs. Row after row of shattered cryogenic units, glass and metal twisted like something had torn them open from inside. Each unit had a label, specimen numbers and dates, but the contents were gone. The residue Sophia had found in those cargo cases, it matched what was coating the inside of these units. Whatever they'd been storing here, it had gotten out a long time ago. And if some of it was still being transported in those cases that washed up on our beach, that meant someone had come back for it. Someone had been here recently enough to pack up samples and ship them out. We regrouped at what looked like a mess hall, sat on rotted benches and tried to make sense of it. Naomi laid it out clearly. This island was a research site for biological experiments involving Ice Age plants and genetic hybridization. Something went wrong. The specimens escaped containment and the facility was abandoned. But someone knew about it. Someone had returned in recent years to collect samples. And somehow, our plane had been forced to crash here, and 8 of our passengers had been injected with something before they ever boarded. Jonah asked the question we were all thinking. If those plants, those hybrids, were still here, still alive after 60 years, what had they become? What had 60 years of uncontrolled evolution done to organisms designed to survive anything? Isaac said we needed to get back to camp immediately, warn everyone, prepare for the possibility that we weren't alone on this island, that whatever was making those sounds at night wasn't just wild boars anymore. We packed up what files we could carry and started back. It was late afternoon by then, shadows getting long, and I kept thinking about Alina and Victor, how they disappeared without a trace, how easily something could be watching us right now from the jungle, and we'd never know until it was too late. We made it maybe 3 miles before Camille saw the tracks. Fresh prints in the mud near a stream crossing, cloven hooves like a boar but massive, each print the size of a dinner plate. They were recent, maybe an hour old, and they followed our path. Something had been tracking us. We moved faster after that, didn't stop until we reached camp just before dark on day 16. Daniel met us at the perimeter, took one look at our faces, and knew we'd found something bad. We showed him the files, explained everything. He listened without interrupting, and when we finished, he just nodded. Said he'd seen the tracks too, near the water source, near the places we gathered food. Said he'd been trying not to scare people, but whatever was out there, it was getting bolder. That night we had a full camp meeting, laid out everything we'd learned, the facility, the experiments, the containment breach, the hybrid organisms. Some people didn't believe it, said it sounded like science fiction. Others believed immediately because they'd seen things, heard things, felt watched when they were alone. Marcus stood up and said this changed nothing, said rescue was still coming, said we just needed to defend ourselves until then. But his voice shook when he said it. He was scared. We were all scared. Day 17 brought the fever deaths we'd been dreading. The 2 people Clara had quarantined died within hours of each other. Same symptoms as Owen, burning from the inside, organs failing. Clara did rough autopsies, as much as she could with the tools she had. She found something in their tissue, microscopic fibers that looked organic but weren't from any human cell structure. Plant matter, she thought, but integrated so deeply into their organs, it was like they'd been growing it inside them. She showed the slides to Sophia, asked if this matched what she knew about the experiments. Sophia went quiet for a long time. Then she said yes, it matched. The files had mentioned this, a late-stage symptom in the human trials from the early 60s. The plant matter would integrate with the host, slowly replacing human tissue with hybrid cells. The subjects died because their bodies rejected the transformation, fought against it until their immune systems burned them out. She said there was a word for it in the old reports. Rejection syndrome, the body's last attempt to stay human. Then Sophia showed us her arm. The injection mark had changed. What had been a small puncture was now a raised line, dark green beneath the skin, branching like roots. She said she could feel it sometimes, a tingling sensation spreading up toward her shoulder. She'd been one of the 8 injected passengers. She was transforming, just slower than the others. She had maybe a few weeks before the fever came for her too. The camp fell apart after that. People started accusing each other of being infected, of hiding symptoms. Marcus's faction wanted to quarantine all 8 of the injected passengers immediately, lock them away from everyone else. Daniel refused, said we didn't abandon our people. The arguments went on for hours until Clara shouted over everyone. She said fighting wouldn't save us, understanding might. She said we needed to go back to that facility, search deeper, find out if the researchers had discovered a cure or a treatment. Find out if there was any way to stop this. Day 19, Lena Serrano was on night watch when she saw them clearly for the first time. She came running into camp just before dawn, woke everyone up, could barely speak, she was so terrified. She'd been posted at the north perimeter when she heard movement in the trees. Expected to see one of us, someone going to relieve themselves, but what emerged from the jungle wasn't human. Boars, she said, but wrong. 3 of them, each the size of a small horse, moving together like they were coordinating. And they had growths, plant structures, growing out of their backs and skulls, bioluminescent in the dark, pulsing with a faint green light. She'd frozen, watched them circle the perimeter just beyond the firelight. They weren't hunting, not exactly. They were observing, studying us. After maybe 5 minutes, they'd retreated back into the jungle, moving in perfect sync. She said the worst part was their eyes. They had too much intelligence in them, too much awareness, like they knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel doubled the watch, posted guards in shifts of 4 instead of 2. We reinforced the perimeter with more sharpened stakes, built barriers from airplane parts. Everyone who could hold a weapon got one. We were preparing for a siege, except we didn't know when it would come or why. Sophia said maybe the creatures were drawn to the injected passengers, could sense the same plant matter in their systems. Maybe they saw them as part of the herd. Or maybe they saw them as threats, invasive organisms in their territory. Day 21, they attacked. Just after midnight, the whole pack came at once. I counted 12 of them, massive hybrid boars with plant matter writhing across their bodies like armor. They hit the perimeter from 3 sides, coordinated, deliberate. We fought them with metal spears and sharpened debris and anything we could use as a weapon. Rafael Cortez, our security officer, he managed to kill one, but it gored him in the process, tore open his leg. 6 others were injured, nothing fatal but bad enough. We killed 3 of them total. The rest retreated, but we knew they'd be back. Daniel organized teams to drag the dead ones away from camp. Didn't want them rotting near where we slept. Sophia asked to examine them first. She spent an hour taking samples, studying the way the plant matter had fused with animal tissue. It wasn't parasitic, she said. It was symbiotic. The plants and the boars had merged into something new, each supporting the other. The plants provided enhanced healing and energy production. The animals provided mobility and protection. Together, they were better than either species alone. She found documentation back at the facility that explained it. The researchers had called it adaptive integration, a process they'd induced artificially but that had continued on its own after the breach. Over 60 years, the escaped specimens had refined the process, evolved it, created stable hybrid organisms that thrived in this environment. The boars weren't the only ones. There were probably birds, insects, maybe even plants that had integrated animal DNA. An entire ecosystem transformed by an experiment that was never supposed to leave the lab. Isaac asked what this meant for the injected passengers. If the hybrids were stable, if the integration could work, did that mean Sophia and the others could survive? Sophia said maybe, but the human trials in the 60s had all failed. The human immune system was too aggressive, fought the integration too hard. Unless someone had solved that problem in the years since, unless whoever had restarted this program had found a way to make humans compatible, the fever would come. Rejection would kill them. Day 22, we made the decision to go back. Not just to the surface facility, but to wherever the researchers had done their primary work. The files mentioned underground labs, deep installations in the cave systems where they'd found the original seeds. If there were answers, if there was any chance of saving the 8 people who were transforming, we we'd find them down there. Daniel, Clara, Sophia, Jonah, Naomi, Dominic, and me. 7 people going into the dark to find something that might not exist. Marcus tried to stop us, said we were abandoning the camp, leaving everyone vulnerable. Daniel told him if we didn't find answers, we'd all be dead in a week anyway, either from the creatures or from the fever spreading to others or from starvation when we ran out of food. This was the only move we had left. Marcus backed down, but I could see it in his eyes. He thought we were making a mistake. He thought we were going to die down there. Maybe he was right, but staying felt like waiting for death. At least this way we were moving towards something, even if that something was worse than anything we'd seen yet. We found the entrance on day 23, hidden beneath the facility, concealed by a collapsed building that Jonah said was intentional, designed to seal it off. We dug for 6 hours before we found the blast door, intact, sealed tight. Dominic got it open using techniques he'd learned as an electrician, bypassing the lock mechanism. The air that rushed out was cold, impossibly cold for a tropical island, and it smelled like earth and metal and something else. The tunnels went down for 2 miles, following natural cave formations that had been reinforced with concrete and steel. Every 100 feet there were blast doors, all of them open, like whoever evacuated had left in such a hurry they didn't bother sealing anything behind them. Our flashlights cut through darkness that felt heavy, oppressive, and the temperature dropped with every step until we could see our breath. Jonah kept muttering about how wrong this was, how we were in the tropics, how it should be getting warmer as we descended, not colder. But the temperature gauges on the walls, still somehow functional, showed readings near freezing. This deep, the volcanic vents created these pockets of cold instead of heat, geological anomalies that turned normal physics sideways. We reached the deep lab on hour 3 of descent. The tunnel opened into this massive cavern, maybe 100 yards across, and someone had built a complete research facility inside it. Prefab buildings, clean rooms, containment units, all of it preserved in the cold like it had been abandoned yesterday instead of 60 years ago. Emergency lighting flickered on when we entered, triggered by motion sensors still running on geothermal power. Dominic almost cried when he saw it. He said the engineering required to keep systems running autonomously for 6 decades was beyond anything he'd seen. Whoever built this place had meant for it to last forever. The main computer terminal was in what looked like a command center, screens covering an entire wall, keyboards coated in a thin layer of frost. Dominic got it running, said the system had been in standby mode, waiting for someone to come back. The interface was old, text-based, but functional. Sophia started pulling up files while the rest of us searched the facility. What we found made the surface installation look like a playground. Rows of containment cells, each one designed to hold a human subject. Medical equipment, surgical theaters, observation rooms with one-way glass. This wasn't just a research lab, it was a prison. A place where they did things to people who couldn't say no. The cells had names written on small placards outside them. Subject 7, Subject 12, Subject 23. 30 cells total. Sophia found the logs that explained who they'd been. Volunteers at first, researchers who believed in the work. 1956 through 59, they'd injected themselves with early versions of the serum, trying to prove the integration could work in humans. The logs documented everything. Initial success, enhanced metabolism, improved healing, resistance to cold. Then the problems started. Behavioral changes, loss of motor control, psychological breakdown. Some subjects died within weeks. Others lingered for months, slowly transforming until they weren't recognizable as human anymore. The photographs in the files showed things I wish I could forget. People with plant matter growing through their skin, faces distorted by root structures, eyes that had turned completely black. By 1960, they'd run out of volunteers. The logs got vague after that, mentioned subjects acquired through external channels, didn't specify what that meant. Prisoners maybe, or people no one would miss. The experiments continued, more aggressive, trying different integration methods, different plant species, different dosages. They were desperate to make it work, convinced they were on the edge of a breakthrough. Subject 28 showed the most promise, survived for 14 months with stable integration, but eventually succumbed to what they called cascade rejection. The plant matter grew faster than the body could adapt, overtook vital organs, killed the host from within. The final entries were from March 1963. Containment failure, multiple subjects escaped their cells during a power outage. Facility staff evacuated to the surface. Remote lockdown initiated, but specimens already loose in the cave systems. Recommendation for complete site sterilization via thermobaric charges, except the charges were never deployed. We found them, crates of explosives stacked in a storage room, still armed, never used. Someone had decided it was easier to just seal the place and forget it existed. Naomi found the real horror in a locked office, files marked with the highest security clearance. Project Phoenix, they called it, a continuation of Deep Winter, authorized in 2020, run by a private corporation with government contracts. The goal was to revisit the original research using modern biotechnology, solve the integration problem that had killed the earlier subjects. They'd made progress, developed a refined serum that showed promise in animal trials. But they needed human test subjects, and they couldn't exactly advertise for volunteers. That's where Dr. June Merritt came in. She'd been part of the original team, a junior researcher in the early 60s who'd survived the evacuation. 60 years later, she was in her 80s, dying of cancer, and she'd devoted her final years to finishing what they'd started. She'd gained access to the island, collected samples from the hybrid organisms that had evolved in the wild, used them to create a new serum. Then she'd needed a way to test it without attracting attention. Trans-Pacific Flight 827, Tokyo to Los Angeles. High traffic route, international passengers, easy to intercept during layovers and delays. Sophia found herself in those files, found all 8 of them. They'd been sedated during mechanical delays, injected with the serum, monitored through follow-up flights over 3 months. June's note said the integration was taking hold, slow but stable. The subjects showed no symptoms because the serum was designed to remain dormant until activated by a specific environmental trigger. The ancient plant compounds preserved in the island's cold caves. They were going to bring them back. The 8 passengers were supposed to return to the island voluntarily, told they'd won some kind of survey prize, all expenses paid trip. Once here, the environmental trigger would activate the serum, complete the integration, and June could observe the results. She'd even prepared a quarantine protocol, a cover story about a viral outbreak to explain why they couldn't leave. But someone found out. Someone in the government or military, someone who knew about the original Deep Winter project and its standing orders. The plane was diverted, not to rescue the passengers, but to contain them. Sophia pulled up the communication logs, found the automated response that had overridden the pilot's controls. Emergency Protocol Nightfall, it was called. Any aircraft carrying potential deep winter contaminants must be diverted to the island for permanent containment. No exceptions, no human override. The system had detected something, maybe the serum in the passenger's bloodstream, maybe some kind of tracking marker June had included. Either way, the plane was forced down. 237 people sacrificed to contain 8. Clara asked the obvious question. If they knew about the 8 passengers, why not just quarantine them at an airport, keep them isolated? Why crash an entire plane? Jonah found the answer in another file. The island's quarantine zone extended 50 miles in every direction. Any vessel or aircraft entering that zone was automatically rerouted by international agreement. Satellites and GPS systems altered to make the area appear as open ocean with no landing sites. But the flight had been close enough that the automated systems registered it as a containment threat. The choice was let it reach Los Angeles and risk a potential outbreak, or bring it down in the only place designed to contain what those passengers carried. They chose containment. We sat there in that frozen facility, surrounded by decades of failed experiments and death, and tried to process what we'd learned. We'd been murdered, not by equipment failure, not by bad luck, but by a system designed to protect the world from what this island contained. And the worst part, the part that made me want to scream, was that the system was probably right. If even one of those 8 passengers had reached a major city and the integration had activated, if the plant matter had started spreading, we'd be looking at a contamination event that could reshape an entire ecosystem. The hybrid organisms on this island proved what 60 years of unchecked growth could do. Imagine that in Los Angeles, in Tokyo, in any place with millions of people. Sophia was the one who found the final piece. A note in June Merritt's files, dated 3 months ago, encrypted but not well enough. She'd succeeded. The new serum worked. Subject trials on the island had shown stable integration, no rejection, no cascade failure. The 8 passengers weren't test subjects anymore. They were carriers, the first successful human hybrids, and they didn't even know it. The fever deaths we'd seen, those were the passengers whose bodies couldn't handle the integration, even with the improved serum. But Sophia and the others who were still alive, they were different. They were adapting. In a few weeks, they'd complete the transformation and become something new. June had left instructions for them. Once the integration was complete, they'd be stronger, faster, capable of surviving on minimal resources. They'd be the next step in human evolution, proof that her life's work hadn't been wasted. All they had to do was survive long enough to finish the change. The facility had supplies, monitoring equipment, everything they'd need. She'd planned for them to live here, on the island, as the first colony of a new species. Except June was dead. Sophia found her body in one of the containment cells, 6 weeks dead by the look of it. The cancer had taken her before she could see her success, and without her guidance, the 8 passengers had been left to transform on their own, to die from rejection or survive into something they didn't understand. We were her legacy, her final experiment, and she hadn't even stayed alive long enough to see the results. Day 26, we returned to camp with everything we'd learned. The climb back up took longer because we were carrying boxes of files, medical supplies, anything that might help. When we emerged, it was late afternoon, and the camp was in chaos. 4 more people had developed fevers overnight. The transformation was accelerating. Sophia said the environmental trigger, being on the island, breathing the air that carried traces of the ancient plant compounds, it was speeding up the process in all 8 passengers. Clara wanted to quarantine them immediately, keep them isolated, monitor their symptoms, try to slow the progression. But Sophia refused. She said quarantine wouldn't help. The serum was already in their systems, already rewriting their DNA. The only 2 options were let them die from rejection or help them survive the transformation. And if they survived, they wouldn't be human anymore. They'd be something else, something that might see us as food or threats or irrelevant. That's when Marcus made his move. He'd been planning it, we found out later, gathering people who were terrified of the transforming passengers. He'd found weapons in the facility armory during our time underground, distributed them to his followers. He said the 8 infected people needed to be eliminated before they turned into monsters. Said it was us or them, and he chose us. Daniel stood between Marcus and the quarantine shelter, told him nobody was killing anyone while he was alive. It would have turned into a bloodbath if Nora Beck hadn't stepped between them. Nora was a lawyer from Chicago, late 30s, had spent the whole crisis trying to keep people calm and rational. She proposed a compromise. We tried to contact rescue one more time, explain the situation, explain that most of us weren't infected. If we could prove that, maybe they'd extract the uninfected survivors and leave the island under quarantine with only those who were transforming. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than murdering 8 people or watching them turn into something we'd have to fight. Nolan said he could do it. He'd been working on the satellite phone for weeks, had stripped parts from every piece of electronics in the camp. He thought he could get a signal strong enough to reach a satellite, maintain it for maybe 30 seconds. Long enough to send coordinates, explain our situation, beg for extraction. Daniel agreed to let him try. Marcus agreed to hold off his execution plan for 72 hours. Everyone else just hoped we weren't making everything worse. Day 30, Nolan got the signal. 18 seconds of connection to a communications satellite, long enough to transmit everything. Our location, our survivor count, the nature of the contamination, a plea to extract the 65 uninfected passengers. We waited. The whole camp gathered around Nolan's jury-rigged equipment, listening to static and hoping for a response. It came 6 hours later. Text only, no voice, just letters appearing on the screen. Nolan had connected to the system. Protocol Nightfall remains active. No extraction authorized. Maintain quarantine. God help you. That was it. That was our answer. They knew we were here. They'd known since the moment we crashed. They'd been monitoring, waiting to see what happened, and they decided we couldn't leave. Couldn't risk even one person carrying contamination back to the mainland. We were written off, abandoned, left to die on this island because it was safer than taking the chance we might spread what we carried. The camp fell apart after that. People were screaming, crying. Some just sat down and stopped responding to anything. Marcus started laughing. This horrible broken sound said he'd been right all along. Rescue was never coming. We'd been sentenced to death the moment the plane touched ground. Daniel tried to keep order, but what was the point? We were prisoners in an open-air tomb, and the walls were closing in. Day 31, Sophia made her discovery. She'd been studying the files obsessively, looking for anything we'd missed, any chance of survival. She found it in June Merritt's final notes, a formula for what she called a neutralizing agent. Theoretical, never tested, but it might work. A compound that would break down the plant matter at the cellular level, kill the hybrid organisms, sterilize the serum in the infected passenger systems. It would stop the transformation, maybe even reverse it in the early stages. But it required synthesis, equipment we had in the deep lab, chemicals we could extract from the island's plant life, and time we didn't have. She said if we could make it work, we could deploy it across the island. Atmospheric dispersal using the facility's environmental systems designed to circulate air through the entire cave network and out to the surface. Release it at the source and let it spread, kill everything carrying the hybrid DNA. The specimens, the transformed creatures, the plant matter in the infected passengers. Sterilize the whole island, prove to whoever was monitoring us that the contamination was gone. Maybe then they'd let the survivors leave. Clara asked the critical question, what would it do to the people who'd already started transforming? Sophia went quiet. Then she said it would kill them. The plant matter was too integrated with their systems now. Remove it and their organs would fail. Their bodies would shut down. They'd die, but they'd die human, die clean. She looked at her arm when she said it, at the green line spreading up toward her shoulder, and I understood what she was really saying. She'd rather die than become what she was turning into. She'd rather burn out the infection than transform into something that might hurt the people she'd survived with. But someone would have to stay behind to operate the system. Manual activation, no remote trigger, no automation they could trust after 60 years of neglect. Someone would have to go down into the deep lab, start the dispersal, and stay there while it worked. Stay there while it killed everything, including them. It was a death sentence for whoever volunteered. That's where I am now. Day 37. In this bunker, 2 miles from the main facility, recording everything while the dispersal system does its work. I've got maybe 30 minutes before the agent reaches this location, before it sterilizes everything, including me. I stayed because someone had to document this, had to make sure the truth got out, even if we didn't. Sophia and the other 7 transformed passengers, they went to the deep lab this morning. They activated the system, released the agent, and now they're gone. The cameras showed them collapsing one by one, the plant matter dissolving, their bodies finally giving out. They died on their own terms. They died human. The 61 other survivors, they're on the southern peninsula right now, beyond the dispersal range, waiting to see if this works. Waiting to see if anyone comes for them once the island is clean. Daniel leads them. Clara will keep them alive. Naomi will tell their story if they ever get home. I hope they do. I hope someone hears this broadcast and understands what happened here. Understands that we were people, not contamination, not acceptable losses. We were people who survived and chose and sacrificed. But there's more. Something I need to tell you before I run out of time. Something about Dr. Merritt's files that I didn't mention before, that we decided not to share with the camp because the panic would have killed us faster than any fever. The 8 passengers on our flight, they weren't the only ones. June had been running this program for 3 months, multiple flights, dozens of injections. We were just the ones who got caught, the ones who crashed before reaching our destinations. The others, they made it home. They're out there right now, walking around Los Angeles and San Francisco and Seattle and Vancouver, carrying active serum in their bloodstreams, waiting for something to trigger the transformation. The files had names, addresses, flight numbers, 43 people total across 6 flights. Some of them might have already started changing. Some of them might have died from rejection, and nobody connected it to anything unusual. But some of them are still out there, still dormant. And if they're exposed to the right conditions, if they come into contact with anything carrying the ancient plant compounds, they'll activate. They'll start transforming. And this time, there won't be an island to contain them. Find them, please. If anyone hears this, if anyone takes this seriously, find them. The files are uploading now. Everything we found, names and locations and medical data. Stop this before it spreads. Before someone else has to make the choice we made. Before another 60 people have to die to clean up someone else's mistakes. Day 32, Sophia came to me before dawn. I was on watch, sitting by the fire, and she just appeared out of the darkness like a ghost. The transformation was visible now, impossible to hide. Her skin had taken on this faint greenish tint, and when she moved her arms, I could see the plant matter beneath her skin, spreading like a network of rivers. She sat down next to me, and we didn't talk for a while. Just listened to the ocean, to the jungle waking up behind us. Then she told me about the neutralizing agent, about how it could work, about what it would cost. She'd spent the night working through the calculations, figuring out synthesis methods using equipment in the deep lab. It was possible, she said. Difficult, but possible. Clara and Chiara D'Souza, a chemist from Mumbai who'd been helping with medical work, they could do it together. 72 hours from start to deployment, maybe less if they worked continuously. The compound would be airborne, spread through the island's entire ecosystem within 6 hours of release. Everything carrying hybrid DNA would die. The boars, the birds, the insects, the plant matter itself. And the 8 passengers whose bodies were already transforming. I asked her if there was any other way, any chance the transformation could be completed successfully, that she and the others could survive as whatever they were becoming. She showed me her hand. The fingers were starting to fuse together, plant matter filling the spaces between them. She said in another week she wouldn't be able to hold anything, wouldn't be able to speak, wouldn't be able to think clearly. The transformation wasn't evolution, it was dissolution. The human parts of her were being consumed to feed something that didn't have consciousness or purpose, just growth. She'd rather die than become that. Clara and Chiara started the synthesis that morning. They set up a makeshift lab using equipment salvaged from the facility, worked in shifts around the clock. Sophia helped when she could, but her hands were becoming useless, her fine motor control degrading by the hour. Oliver Kane was worse. The photographer who'd been one of the 8, he'd stopped speaking on day 30, just sat and stared at nothing while plant matter crept across his face. 2 others were nearly as far gone. They were running out of time. Day 33 brought a decision that nobody wanted to make. The neutralizing agent would work. Clara confirmed it through testing on tissue samples from the dead boars. But deployment required someone to operate the facility's environmental systems manually, stay at the controls for the entire 6-hour dispersal period to ensure nothing failed. The systems were 60 years old, held together by geothermal power and luck. They needed constant monitoring, constant adjustment. Whoever stayed behind would breathe in the agent, would die along with everything else they were trying to sterilize. It wasn't a hypothetical sacrifice, it was guaranteed death. Miles Everett brought it up first. He was a paramedic from Austin, late 20s, had been helping Clara with medical work since the crash. He said if the agent worked, if it cleaned the island completely, maybe the people monitoring us would finally authorize extraction. Maybe the 61 uninfected survivors could go home, but only if someone proved the sterilization was complete, stayed behind to document it, to show that nothing survived. He volunteered before anyone could stop him. Said he didn't have family waiting for him. Said this was the most important thing he'd ever do. Daniel refused. Said we'd find another way. Said nobody was dying alone in that facility. But there wasn't another way. We all knew it. The systems couldn't be automated, couldn't be trusted to run on their own. Someone had to stay. The argument went on for hours until Sophia stood up. She said the 8 transformed passengers would stay. They were dead already, just waiting for the fever to finish them. At least this way their deaths would mean something, would save the others, would end what June Merritt had started. The other transformed passengers agreed, the ones who could still communicate. They'd drawn the specimens to the facility grounds, used themselves as bait, ensure everything was in one place when the agent dispersed. Then they'd operate the systems, make sure it worked, die knowing they'd protected the people they'd survived with. Oliver couldn't speak anymore, but he nodded when Sophia explained it. That was enough. But Sophia said they needed someone else, someone to document everything, to ensure the data reached the outside world, someone who understood what had happened and could explain it in a way that made people listen. She looked at me when she said it. Said I'd been recording since day one. Said I was the one who made sure nothing was forgotten. Said I was the one who had to stay. I tried to argue. Said I wasn't a hero, wasn't brave enough, wasn't important enough. But she was right, and I knew it. Every decision I'd made since the crash had been about documenting, about making sure someone understood what happened to us. This was just the final recording, the last piece of evidence. And if nobody else survived to tell the story, at least my broadcasts would remain, floating out there in the void, waiting for someone to hear them. Day 34, Clara finished synthesizing the agent. She'd worked without sleeping, pushed herself until she was hallucinating from exhaustion, but she'd done it. 3 containers, each holding enough compound to sterilize a third of the island. The dispersal system would take them, vaporize them, spread them through the air. Everything would breathe it, absorb it, die from it. She ran final tests, confirmed the lethality, confirmed there was no antidote. Once deployed, everything within the dispersal zone would be dead within the hour. Everything outside would be safe. The plan was simple. The 61 uninfected survivors would evacuate to the southern peninsula, beyond the dispersal range. Daniel would lead them. Clara would provide medical support. They'd wait 48 hours for the agent to break down naturally before returning. The 8 transformed passengers and I would stay behind. They'd go to the deep lab, activate the environmental systems, hold position until dispersal was complete. I'd go to this backup communication bunker, 2 miles from the main facility, far enough to give me time but close enough that I wouldn't escape. I'd document everything, broadcast it on every frequency the bunker's radio equipment could manage, upload the files we'd collected. Then I'd wait for the agent to reach me. Day 35, we moved the compound to the deep lab. It took 4 trips, careful transport through the tunnels, Sophia and the others helping as much as their deteriorating bodies allowed. Oliver collapsed halfway through the second trip, couldn't get back up. We carried him the rest of the way. He was more plant than human by then, barely aware of his surroundings, but he was still trying to help, still human enough to want to save the others. That night was the last night all of us were together. Daniel organized a meal, used the last of the good food we'd been rationing. People told stories, shared memories, tried to pretend tomorrow wasn't coming. Marcus apologized to everyone, said he'd been wrong about everything, said fear had made him cruel. Clara sat with the transformed passengers, held their hands, told them they were brave. Naomi promised she'd tell the world what happened here, make sure we weren't forgotten. I recorded all of it, kept my camera running until the battery died. Sophia found me after everyone else had gone to sleep. She could barely talk anymore, the plant matter affecting her vocal cords, but she managed to say thank you. Thank you for documenting, for remembering, for staying behind to ensure the truth survived. I told her she didn't need to thank me. Told her we were in this together from the moment the plane went down until the moment the agent took us. She smiled, or tried to, and then she was gone, walking back to the other transformed passengers, back to the people she'd die with tomorrow. Day 36, the evacuation happened at dawn. 61 people, packed light, moving fast, headed for the southern peninsula. Daniel stayed until the last moment, made sure everyone was accounted for, made sure they had supplies and shelter plans and hope. He came to me before leaving, shook my hand, told me I was doing something impossible and necessary, told me the world would remember us because of what I was about to do. I didn't believe him, but I appreciated the lie. Clara was the hardest goodbye. She'd kept so many of us alive, worked herself to exhaustion day after day, never stopped trying to save people, even when there was no hope. She asked me one last time if I was sure, if there wasn't another way. I told her this was the only way. Told her to keep the others alive, to make sure they got home. She hugged me, fierce and desperate, and then she left. Walked away without looking back, because looking back would have broken her. The 8 transformed passengers went down into the deep lab at noon. I went with them, helped them set up the dispersal system, showed them how to operate the controls. Sophia was in charge. She was the only one still coherent enough to manage the sequence. The others would help, would maintain the systems, would ensure nothing failed. I set up cameras throughout the facility, aimed at the controls, at the transformed passengers, at everything. If I was going to die here, I was going to make sure every second was documented. Sophia activated the system at 1300 hours. The environmental processors came online, ancient machinery grinding to life after decades of dormancy. The compound containers were loaded. The vaporization chambers were heating. Everything was working. She gave me a thumbs up, the only gesture she could still make. I gave her one back. Then I left, climbed back up through the tunnels while the system prepared to kill everything I was leaving behind. I reached this bunker 2 hours ago. It's a communication station built into the hillside, designed as a backup if the main facility went dark. The radio equipment still works, powered by the same geothermal systems that kept the deep lab running. I've been broadcasting since I arrived, sending out this story on every frequency, uploading every file we collected. If you're hearing this, if anyone's hearing this, then it worked. The transmission made it out. I can see the main facility from here through the bunker's observation window. See the vents on the hillside where the agent is dispersing right now, spreading invisible death across the island. The specimens are gathering there, drawn by the transformed passengers who made themselves bait. Dozens of hybrid boars, birds I can't identify, things that might have been human once. They're circling the facility, and as I watch, they're starting to collapse. The agent is working. Everything is dying. The cameras in the deep lab are still transmitting. I can see Sophia and the others at the controls, can see them maintaining the systems even as the agent fills the chamber. Oliver went first, just stopped moving, plant matter withering across his body. Then two others. Sophia is still standing, still adjusting the controls, still ensuring everything works. Then she falls, and the camera loses focus, and I know they're all gone. The agent is spreading faster than projected. I can smell it now, sweet and chemical, drifting through the bunker's air vents. I've sealed what I can, but this place wasn't designed to be airtight. I've got maybe 20 minutes, maybe 30. Long enough to finish this broadcast, long enough to make sure everything uploads, long enough to say what needs to be said. To the 61 survivors on the southern peninsula, if you ever hear this, you did nothing wrong. You were passengers on a flight that was murdered by people trying to contain something they should have destroyed 60 years ago. You survived because you were strong and lucky and stubborn. Daniel, keep them safe. Clara, keep them healthy. Naomi, tell them our story. Make sure the world knows we were people, not statistics, not acceptable casualties. We were people who chose to die so others could live. To whoever's monitoring this island, whoever decided Protocol Nightfall was more important than 237 lives, I hope this haunts you. I hope you lie awake at night thinking about the choice you made, about the people you murdered. We sterilized your island for you, cleaned up the contamination, died so your secret could stay buried. The least you can do is let the survivors go home. They're not infected. They're not threats. They're just people who want to live. Give them that chance. To the families of everyone who died on Flight 827, I'm sorry. Sorry we couldn't save everyone. Sorry some of us had to make choices nobody should have to make. Sorry you'll never know the whole truth, because the people responsible will bury it along with us. Your loved ones were brave. They were terrified and desperate and broken, but they were brave. They survived impossible things and died protecting each other. Remember them for that. The smell is stronger now. My hands are starting to shake. The agent is close, maybe 5 minutes away. I'm uploading the last of the files, everything we found, every name on June Merritt's list, every piece of evidence that proves what happened here. 43 people out there carrying active serum, waiting to transform. Find them. Stop this. Don't let our deaths be meaningless. Don't let this happen again. The jungle is changing color, green fading to brown as the plant matter dies. The hybrid specimens are gone, collapsed around the facility like they were sleeping. Everything is quiet now, peaceful almost. After 37 days of chaos and fear and death, the island is finally still. I'm thinking about my camera gear, about the footage I shot in Tokyo that seems like it happened in another lifetime. About the documentary I was making about urban farming and sustainability and humanity's future. Funny how none of that matters now. The only future that matters is whether the survivors get home, whether the people on Merritt's list get found, whether anyone learns anything from this disaster. My throat is closing, hard to breathe. The agent is here in my lungs, in my blood, breaking down cells, stopping processes, ending everything. It doesn't hurt, not really. Just a heaviness, a tiredness, like falling asleep after the longest day of your life. To anyone listening, remember us. Remember Flight 827. Remember the 73 who survived the crash. Remember the 61 who might make it home. Remember Sophia Hahn and Oliver Kane and the 6 others who sacrificed themselves to save people they barely knew. Remember that we were ordinary people who did extraordinary things because we had no choice. Remember that we chose how we died even if we couldn't choose whether we died. This is Ethan Ward, survivor of Trans-Pacific Flight 827, signing off from somewhere in the South Pacific that you'll never find on any map. Day 37, final broadcast. Remember us. Please, just remember,